Hello everyone, I'm Seamus. I'm here to tell you about how you can transform yourself from an employee within a company, or if you prefer not to work for an organization, transform yourself into a free agent or entrepreneur. Okay, let's look at this slide here for a second. What was the realization before I transformed myself from an employee to a free agent? It was in the year 1985. I was working in a lab. I was earning $525 a month. No big realization there. But the realization was that the person who's sitting right on top was a chemist, a person with skills, a person with knowledge. So from that point, I think the realization for me especially was that I think we need to have credentials and knowledge in order to move on. There are many ways that you can survive today. I think one of the key is how to have knowledge, how to use that knowledge to your advantage. We live in a very different world today. We are looking at a world that has transformed itself from a very product-based world. That means, it used to be that a company that is great is a manufacturing company, a company that manufactures a lot of products. The more it manufactures, the bigger it gets. But today, the world has changed. It has transformed from, the 1990s, where we hear a lot about dot-com companies, to today, where companies are scaling down. They're no longer so manufacturing-centric. They are turning into knowledge companies, which means companies that manufacture knowledge. They no longer make so much products. They leave the making of products to someone else. They outsource the manufacturing to some other companies. So with that realization, we need to know that we need to also transform ourselves to be within the economy, whether or not we work for a company or work for ourselves. So if, let's say today, we hear a lot about this thing called, we need to network with someone, we need to know some people. But it's no longer so true. It used to be that you can know someone and get ahead. But today, you need not just to know someone, but you need to know something. Okay? So I think what you need to do is leave the mindset of knowing people somewhat behind and think outside the box to say, okay, how can I acquire knowledge to know something that I can sell? So then you may ask this question, but who am I? I'm working in a company, or I'm just a nobody. I don't have money. I don't have startup capital. What do I want to do? What can I do, right? Then I'll tell you the story about when I first started. I was working for a computer company. It was quite a large company. I took the sales right up to 60 million a year. But then, as you know, working for any sizable concern, you have to report to bosses. No matter what you do, you always add some kind of accountability to bosses who may have a different mindset of their own. Nothing wrong with that, but it may not work with you. That means their mindset and your mindset is completely not synergistic. So with that realization, I said, hey, maybe I should do something on my own. The first time that I set up a company, it was a communications company. Basically, we help companies get ahead in terms of marketing, communications, and all that. I went around begging for business, literally, even though I was very well qualified at that time. I mean, being a corporate executive and whatnot. But the first time I set up my business, I literally had to go around trying to get people to sign up, just to give me business. What kind of business did I get? It was an $800 kind of business. So you go around, you go to the far corners of the earth, and then you get businesses that were not fantastic. What is the learning lesson there? It means that no matter what you do, there must be baby steps. I think those are baby steps. But from those times, I think any one of us will have realized if you put in enough effort, you will have moved forward. So today, we no longer do that kind of business. I mean, today we're looking at businesses that are at least 10 times that value per month. So with some effort, with some skills and knowledge, you can do it. It's just a matter of, can you wait out that period, the learning period, the baby steps? So you say, okay, maybe I'm not exactly the kind of fit, the kind of strategic fit that I can be in a company. Or even if I set up my own business, I may not find myself such a fit in that kind of environment. Meaning, the kind of skills that I may have doesn't seem so sellable. Then the thing you need to know is, every one of us is a misfit in some way. Okay? I mean, if you look at me, you think I'm pretty normal. But there are a lot of things about me that you probably don't know. For example, I'm deeply short-sighted. I nearly died when I was born. I was premature and I nearly died. And then I have a very terrible curved spine. It's still existing today. But if just looking at me, you will never guess that I have some limitations. So meaning any one of us have some form of, being a misfit at some corner or some way. But there is always a way for us to go beyond being the misfit. Okay, then the next thing you need to ask is, I'm ready to go. I want to set up my own business. I want to be a free agent. What is your trigger? You need to know what is the driving force that would tell you the time when I set up my business was 1991. I decided to quit and say, okay, I need to do my own thing. What was that trigger? So some of the trigger could be you're very tired of the job. I mean, that could be, right? Or it could be you retrench. And that's beginning to be more and more of a reality, right? And this is a Chinese saying, the hero without the battleground. That means you have a lot of skills and knowledge. You have done exceptionally well in your company, but you're not recognized. There is no more playing field for you. They tell you just work within the boundaries, play within these rules. These are the rules, play to it. That is also another trigger that could be, right? And also, maybe you need more time for yourself. When I work for others, I literally have to sleep in the company. But when I work for myself, I can spend a lot of time with my family and still make more money than ever before. That is a reality. Simply because, where you work, you don't need to travel so much, or even if you do travel, you can structure your time so much better. And the last thing is freedom. We are all creatures of freedom. That means we demand, we desire, we long for freedom. So if that is a big driving force, you'll find that being a free agent is a tremendous draw. Okay? So find your trigger. Also, the next thing that you need to ask yourself, okay, I got my trigger. Okay, then you need to ask yourself, am I a Ronin or am I a clerk? We always assume that we have a lot of skills and knowledge, but we want to make sure that the skills and knowledge can be transformed into a usable skill. Meaning when we go out there, are we an employable samurai, a Ronin, a traveling samurai? When we walk out the streets, some warlock comes to us and say, I've got a job for you, go slice up something. Yes, I'm the guy for you because I've got a right sword and I've got the skills. So meaning, we should not just be administrators. Even right now, if you're working for a company and you're thinking about becoming a free agent, what you need to do is create a mindset of a Ronin. That means whatever you do, make sure those can be translated into a sellable skill or sellable knowledge. So from now on, think like a traveling samurai. Think like what they call a bossless samurai. That means you don't have a boss. Whoever that is, you're on contract. You think with that mindset, you'll be able to get faster ahead because you will acquire skills and knowledge that will make you powerful when you become really a free agent. Okay, this is the story about me selling stuff when I was in junior school. Okay, in the old days, kids like us like to play with geekish toys. Boys, okay? So we buy toys like sea monkeys, which is basically brine stream. That means a kind of little prawns that swim around in this plastic tank. And you pay a lot of money in those days. I mean, we're looking at about $15 in the year 70s or before, right? So that was a lot of money. And a lot of kids wanted to have those kind of stuff. There is an easy way to do business and there's a hard way. What did I do? I did the hard way. Meaning I went to research and find out what are these brine streams all about? What do they feed on? And then I created my own packaging. I bought quantity streams and then created my own product, even in those days. And then, of course, kids love magic tricks. So rather than buy those magic tricks that cost $30 in those days, I created my own, whether it's card tricks or whatever, and packaged my own. And in those days, you don't have desktop publishing. You have a typewriter. If you're lucky, you get a red ribbon and a black ribbon. But even with those limitations, I was able to create something that was quite acceptable to kids as similar to commercial packaging. And I made money in those days. So the idea is, if you want to be a free agent, what is your differentiation? There will be a lot of big boys. And then you look at this colossal giants and say, there's no way I can beat these guys. But there's always a way you can beat those guys, because there's always an audience that demands a vertical niche in your product. Seize the opportunity. In the year 1996, when internet became commercial in Singapore, a lot of people were doing that. Let's wait and see, right? It's like, maybe I'll look at it and say, I'll think about it, right? You'll attend seminars. You'll look at it and say, yeah, that sounds very interesting. I'll think about it. After many years or months or whatever, they were still thinking about it. But at that point, I seized the opportunity and made sure that I dive right into it, to whether or not to author my own web pages, learn the programming languages or whatever as a skill, as a piece of knowledge that I can sell. And today, I can still use those knowledge as a e-learning consultant. So the idea is, when you identify some opportunity, seize it and use it and learn and practice and read. There is no time to waste. When you see something that is good, just go for it. Even if it means spending less time playing with kids and babies and reading thick 500-page books in the late hours, that would have to do. Okay, the next thing you want to ask yourself is, not all businesses succeed. Is there a tangential path that you can, like a backup plan, so to say? As with any computer user, I mean, a lot of you guys will have data on a computer. The frequent thing that you hear is back up your data, right? So, if you don't back it up, you back it up into the same hard disk, the hard disk crash, you've got nothing. You need to back it up to an external CD-ROM, a DVD, whatever cartridge, right? So there are multiple layers of backup. As with life, same thing. Create a tangential path that can succeed. So for example, in my case, I actually took on the path of holistic health. It's something interesting. I'm passionate about it. It's something that I would love to read, and reading about it or learning about it is not a chore. So find that trigger again to see whether or not you can identify a tangential path to whatever you want to do. That means you have a primary business, and think about something that you like as a secondary business. Okay, here I'll just share with you some tips and tricks along the way we learn about such things, and perhaps you can even see in an upcoming book called .zen. We want to look at mistakes to avoid, ways to market yourself as a small business, some of the tips of public relations or PR, and what are some of the tips of using information technology and the internet for your small business, and also what are some of the cost containment secrets. That means, as a small business, we all love to look grand. But come on, there is no way we can look grand if we are starting out. So what are some of the secrets that we can use as a small business? First of all, five mistakes to avoid would be, the biggest thing is to think that the bank is your friend. The bank is not your friend. The bank is a lending machine. When you go to a bank, they lend you money. No amount of networking is going to change that relationship. So that is something you need to keep on top of the mind. Relationships are all that's needed. Relationships come after you get famous, after you get effective, after you get knowledgeable, after you get more sellable. That's when relationships become more important. But when you start out, relationships are less important. No amount of networking will get you anywhere. Trust me, I've tried all that. And another mistake is, if you don't use IT effectively, as a small company, the most powerful tool to beat the big guys, the David versus Goliath, the slingshot thing, IT is your slingshot. If you don't use IT, you're not going to get very far. Okay? And if you don't use the media to your advantage, that is another big mistake. A lot of small as well as big companies avoid the media like the plague. It's like, hey, I might be misquoted, and something might come out the way that I don't want it to be. So those are the kind of mindset that will actually drag you behind. Big boys have, big departments that handle PR and whatnot, and they will go through all the hierarchy before a message comes out. If you are a small company and you can just talk to the press like that, your message will be much faster than the big boys. You will get your voice heard before the big boys get theirs heard. The last thing is overly flexible or low pricing. this is a mistake that I learned. Hopefully you don't make the same mistake. Meaning, if you're too flexible with pricing, then you're going to get into trouble. Meaning, when this prospective client comes to you and say, well, let us slice off 50% of your fees, and you say, okay, then you're in trouble because you have the precedence for future prospects to do the same. And after all, it is a small market. 5 ways to market a small business. The first thing is online. You need to refine and practice your search techniques to make sure that you know what to do searching for something, whether or not searching for yourself or searching for some other information. And the thing is, direct response ads. If you need to take out an advertisement, the advertisement has got to have a direct response mechanism. When you're a small business, you don't want to build image. You want to build response. You want to build leads. And if you want to take advertising, go small, but go very consistent. I'm sure you've seen some of these, fellow peer speakers like me, fellow speakers who actually take out very small ads, but they take out ads consistently. The idea of a small business is if you have got a limited budget, take small ads, but make sure they go very often. Okay? And if you can, get invited to be a speaker at seminars. That means as you progress and become acknowledged as an expert, get invited to be a seminar speaker, usually for free, but then that's where you build up your portfolio. Okay? And the last thing, which is not unimportant, is good stationery. If you're a small company, if you have got a marketing budget to spend, the place that you need to spend your budget is in your stationery. Name cards, letterheads, pencils, pens, files, whatever. Something that you give away and make an impression. I've seen a lot of law firms that are very small, but with stationery that beat the hell out of all the top consulting companies. That's why they can create an impression and attract you as a customer. 5 tips for public relations. The first thing you need to remember is with a journalist, journalists are skeptics. I'm a journalist. I'm extremely skeptical about everything. The thing is, build trust. The second thing, also equally important, is speak the truth always. These 2 things always go hand in hand. You must build trust with a journalist. If the journalist doesn't trust you, they will never talk to you ever again. Meaning, you will never get yourself in the press. And if you don't speak the truth, even for once, you will never get covered again. Same thing, right? You see, the journalists, they have this favorites list, okay? So imagine you have this computer monitor and these guys with little post-it notes around the corner of the monitors. Journalists have that kind of post-it notes. You want to be one of those guys on their post-it notes on their monitor so that they will call you up for quotes all the time. That's what happens to journalists, okay? And when you try to sell a story to the media, keep the story very short and sweet. Meaning, don't give them the 5-page news release. They'll never read it. They receive hundreds of news releases every day. Most of them are treated as spam and junk and trash. So meaning, if it's something exciting, keep it really short. And before you send out the press release, you need to send a very good pitch. A pitch is basically, we are all salespeople in one way or another. We need to sell something. Even when we sell a story to the media, we call it pitching. We need to sell that story. But how you sell the story is a big piece of experience. Meaning, if you come too aggressive, the press throws it away as sales talk. So there is a right way to pitch that story. That's the key. That means the news release is really secondary. If you got a lousy pitch, you can forget about your news release. And once you actually get the media interested, leave the journalists to do their own work. Journalists are not just skeptical, they are also impatient and intolerant, meaning they will not like a lot of nonsense. So when they are interested, leave them alone. Don't call them and say, hey, Joe, how about covering the story? Have you received my press release? Have you done this? Have you done that? When is it going to come out? You will never get another call from a journalist ever again. 5 tips of information technology and the internet. Even as a small business, you need to have your own mail server. A lot of small businesses still do not take the internet seriously, so they have, let's say, one of those free mail, free web mail addresses, the Yahoo and the Lycos or whatever. That's not going to make a big impression on prospects and customers. People who have never heard of you before. Why would they trust you if you have something that is, like something for free? So even as a small business, you need to set up your own mail server. Okay. And you need to have what we call a data center hosting. There are many ways to host your website. There are the cheap way, the $10 ways, and there are those $100 and beyond ways. The idea is never go for the lowest. Always go for at least somewhat more than what you can afford. Because data centers, meaning those big web hosting companies, are able to keep your website up almost all the time. There's less trouble. Even when you try to move your website to another supplier, you get less trouble. And small shops really don't have the bandwidth if you scale up. And moving your website from host to host is not the trouble you are looking for. Okay? And if you don't have in-house expertise, then either you learn or you acquire some expertise. So the idea is, as a small shop, you need to know as much as possible rather than leave it just to everyone else. Okay? And if you're looking at, let's say, software to acquire, there is not just one way to grade software. The greatest software actually happens with free. When I mean free, you don't pay for it. You pay in time, effort, and learning. See, there's a difference. If you buy commercial software, you pay a price for the software, and there's some learning curve, right? They tend to be somewhat easier to use. If you go for free software, they tend to be a lot more powerful. They're free. You don't have to pay a fee for them. But what you have to pay is time, learning, patience. You need to learn those stuff. Okay? So if you intend to actually progress to get a nice, good infrastructure that can stand, the hacking and whatnot, then you need to put in some learning curve. And never imagine that even, as your small business grows, you actually have more staff and employees. You should empower everybody within the company. I always teach in classes that even the receptionists ought to have their own email account and their own computer. Because that's the first person at the door of your company. That means anyone within the company who has any kind of doing with a customer should be empowered with a computer and a full email account. A lot of small companies still don't empower their employees that way. That means they have a general email account, sales@company.com.sg or sales at whatever, and that email is like shared by 5 people. Each salesperson should have their own personalized email account. Okay, what are some of the cost containment secrets? If you're just starting out, don't, at the first instance, go out and rent a small office. If you can, go for a virtual office. You grow to a certain size, then you acquire office. Okay, rather than go and make the big time office and then you realize you can't pay the rent. The next thing you want to do is sell knowledge, not just goods. That means it's easy to actually just buy some goods off the stand and get some off-the-shelf stuff and then sell those goods. But it's a lot harder to sell knowledge. But have you noticed that the highest paid people in the world are selling their brains? Nobody is selling the goods. So I think that's something we need to learn from those guys. You also need to know how to use the internet and e-commerce to reduce your costs. That means rather than having a shelf out there, you can actually use the internet to your advantage to sell goods, to sell services, to sell subscriptions and whatnot. And if you don't have expertise in-house for IT infrastructure, get outside help. But don't employ them full-time. Get contract help. That means you use them for a period of time and then let them go. Because then you can renew the skills. And these skills come very easily. Okay? And the last thing is, rather than expand in different geographical locations, you may even want to form alliances and partnerships, rather than go build different offices. We as Asians have this problem, okay? We believe that we should expand and then feel the strength of numbers and physical locations. There's a mindset that has to change, meaning we need to create as many virtual presence as possible rather than physical locations with hundreds of staff every location. That's no longer necessary. Get contract help, get virtual locations, get partnerships, get alliances. Very important as a small business, especially as a small business, is protect your intellectual property or intellectual capital. Okay? So you need to understand the difference between a copyright, a trademark, a service mark, and patents. So what are this stuff? You need to talk to a good patent attorney who practices in that area. Not all lawyers are the same. There are those who understand intellectual property, and there are those who don't. There are those that can only do your housing stuff. There are those who really understand this stuff. So get someone qualified to explain to you this stuff. Once you come up with some good intellectual property, trademark it, copyright it, whatever, get all the legal frameworks done. And even as a small business, you want to license your intellectual property. That's how you spread yourself. It's almost like franchising something away. So you license your intellectual property, okay? And freely license, meaning you should create more mind share, especially when you're small, to spread yourself out so that people know more about you. And don't try to use litigation as the first instance if something goes wrong, meaning someone infringes on your intellectual property. The first thing you do is get a lawyer and sue the pants off that guy. That's not the right way, because you create a lot of negative publicity. People who litigate end up the losers in the media. So the idea is you want to educate people to use your intellectual property correctly rather than litigate. So educate, not litigate. Okay?